Hello, Ginny. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. I loved your book so much, and I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. But first of all, tell us about who you are and what you do.
I'm a mom. That is who I am and what I do. It answers both questions, doesn't it?
It does.
Our family lives in Michigan. We have five kids that range in age from 15 down to 7. So two teenagers, one that's almost a teenager, a 10, and a 7-year-old. This is a very sweet spot of years. I am loving it. Nobody's in diapers and nobody can drive. So this is good. We're all together for just a short period more, and it's really special. Um, Beyond that, beyond being a mom and trying to figure out what we're having for dinner, um, I founded a movement about a decade ago called 1000 Hours Outside with the aim of enhancing family life and enhancing childhood and building this foundation of memories that we share together that also enhance development. And so it's something that I started writing about when I was a young mom, and this answer of getting outside in sometimes for like an extended period of time really solves a lot of modern parenting problems, and it's just changed the trajectory of our lives. And so that is why I'm here.
I love it, and I loved your book. Till the streetlights come on. I really enjoyed it, and it's going to by the time the podcast is out, the book will be available wherever you like to buy books, and we'll link to it in the show notes. And I highly recommend it. It goes a lot beyond just your 1,000 hours outside idea, and I really loved it. And what a journey that
Thank
you've
you.
been on. Like really, what a journey. Can you tell us? I mean, from reading your book, I sort of pinpointed where it started was your first good day as a mom.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about your first good day as a mom?
Yeah, that is where it started. I did not enjoy my first couple years of being a mom, which I was very bummed about because I was excited to be a mom and I was expecting to love it. I liked kids. I'd always liked kids. And I felt like I was good at other areas of my life. You become an adult, if you go to college, you just even your school years growing up. I thought, well, there's certain things that I'm good at. And I thought, well, I'll probably be decent at this too. And it just was a shock to me how hard it was, how relentless it was, how uncontrollable it felt. I was expecting to use a schedule. Some of my friends had done that, and it just didn't really work for our kids. And I had to scrap that. And I was lost, Sarah. Like, what do I do with my life with these kids? And well, even when we just had the one, my story starts when we had three little ones. But even when we just had that first one, I felt very lost. And even though we had family that was willing to help and very loving, our babies were really clingy. And, they didn't even, for, the first year, they didn't even want to go with dad, let alone grandpa or a grandma or anyone else. So you're the one. You're the person. You're the main person 24/7 every single day. It doesn't end. You're up early, you're exhausted. And basically I just felt like I was constantly failing. I'm struggling. I'm not super happy. My kids don't seem super happy, and this felt like a dark place to me, and also just a disappointing place because I was different than what I had expected and was hoping for. And then I had a friend who I went to MOPS with, Moms of Preschoolers. I think they've recently changed their name, but we were doing all these different programs to fill the time. The problem is that programs don't fill much of the time. So if you go to a library program or if you go to a music program, whatever the program is, swim lessons, it's like 45 minutes. But you have put in
Plus, it takes
all of
you,
this effort.
yeah, it takes you 45 minutes at least to get ready for it, and then to get done with it.
Yes. Yeah, and it's exhausting to try and get kids out of the door and with all the things that you need for them. And it would just take up this small portion of the day. And at MOPS, this friend of mine said, Charlotte Mason says, it's just kind of, it wasn't out of the blue because Charlotte Mason is, I've learned since, is someone who laid down some really beautiful educational philosophy. A lot of homeschoolers use it, but I think Charlotte Mason worked with all sorts of school situations, I think. That she was from the 1800s and she wrote these volumes about kids and learning. She wasn't a mom herself, but she had all this beautiful insight. Anyway, I didn't know Charlotte Mason was from the 1800s, but my friend comes to MOPS and she'd been reading some of the work. that was written by Charlotte Mason. And she said, Charlotte Mason says kids should be outside for 4 to 6 hours a day whenever the weather is tolerable. And I had never heard anything like that, Sarah. And in fact, I thought it was the most outlandish idea. 4 to 6 hours in one day? I mean, we're doing things that are 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And even in those small snippets, it was a circus act to try and keep the kids engaged. They're wanting to do their own thing. So I just thought, well, this is outlandish. And if I would have known at the time that Charlotte Mason was from the 1800s, I probably would have dismissed the whole thing altogether. But I didn't know. So I think this is a current person. And then this friend of mine says, well, let's try it. And I was thinking, no, no way. Let's not try it because it's going to crash and burn. What are the kids going to do? I'm like, I can't keep their attention for more than 12 minutes. I'll make a whole craft for them to do. It's on the floor. They are done with it already. They're whining. So I thought 4 to 6 hours, this is going to be miserable. But in that stage of life, you're also really trying to build friendships because you're lonely. I mean, this is a really hard stage when you have these young kids. So I agreed to go. I said, I'm going to go. So it was the fall, and I know we don't live too far from each other. So it was the fall in Michigan, which I'm sure the fall in Toronto is also beautiful. It's beautiful. We met at a park in September of 2011. I mean, I can picture it to this day. It's so bizarre. There's hardly anything I can picture in my mind from 2011, but I can picture this day. I can picture the kids, what they were wearing. We go to this park that wasn't a playground, so no play structure, which actually I think with little kids makes things easier. Play structures can feel a little dangerous, like what if they fall off? They're still pretty little. And we went to this place that had grass and a creek that ran through, and that was it. And I was just so thrown off. I'm like, what are these kids going to do? And my friend had said not to bring anything. Like, don't bring anything, like, shouldn't we have I should have my bag of library books and we should probably have a bag of toys and we should bring, I always joke, like, should we bring the water table? Like, what are the kids going to do for 4 to 6 hours? So we're meeting at 9 in the morning. The plan was to stay till 1 in the afternoon and to bring some food for lunch. And so what happened was we spread out our picnic blankets and we sat on our picnic blankets. We each had a baby. So that sat with our babies and the babies would nurse and sleep and look around and I don't know. And then the other kids just played. They just played. And I was so floored because I had no idea that kids could do that for 4 hours. So she had two and I had two. And this is a key to the story. It wasn't just siblings there. We had met up with some friends and the kids were ages 1 to 4. And they just ran around for 4 hours and they found stuff to do and they played and they came back and got food when they were hungry. And at 1 o'clock, we packed up and I had a chance to exhale. I had a chance to catch my breath. I had a chance for my blood pressure to go down. I had a break. It was the first real substantial break of any kind that I'd had in 3 years. And I say it was my best day of my life because it was the first good day I had as a mom because I'd not had a good day up until that point. And all of a sudden, parenting felt more manageable. It felt more peaceful. And we got in the car and everyone felt good. It's, a 10-minute drive home. Everyone fell asleep. This is a miracle. And just right away, we were all thriving. It took one experience to go from this spot where I was drowning. I was wishing it away, but you don't want to wish it away. I mean, they're special years. And I was drowning, and then things changed in one day where all of a sudden I felt like I could do it. And I could do it because there was a place. I always say it's like Mother Nature mothered me. It was like I had a mother out there, right? With a shining sun and someone to engage the kids. It's like having, this grandmother or something that, that's engaging the kids in such deep and meaningful ways for an extended period of time. And so that's what happened. I initially changed the way that we were doing early childhood, really for the sake of myself, because I thought, well, if I can be a more present mother, a more fulfilled mother, not so frazzled and haggard, just a little more joyful in it, then that's going to change the trajectory for our family. But what I've learned since and what I noticed right away is that our kids were thriving too. So, what a gift. When kids play outside in self structured ways, it helps their cognition, it helps their emotional state, it helps their social skills, and it helps them physically in ways that go beyond movement. Like it's helping their eyesight and it's helping their joints, it's helping their skeletal system to be strong. So there's so much there, and it does something for all of us.
I love that so much. It's I was reflecting on, so my kids are older. They're 15, no sorry, 16, 19 and 22. And I was reflecting on the 1,000 hours outside, and I realized, because I was a stay-at-home mom, and because of where I live, which is, I live in an island that's a car-free community, and our kids have like sort of that old-fashioned childhood where they could just go outside, like, and our house was
Mhm.
tiny and we didn't have any money. And I was like, oh my gosh, we had the 1,000 hours outside,
Mhm.
like, because of situations, not because I
Right.
had to get out. I can totally relate to what you said. Like, when you leave the house and go to the, like, we'd often go to the park. When you leave the house and go to the park, the dishes aren't staring at you. You're not
Yeah.
feeling like all the weight of everything that you quote should be doing. And
Mhm.
you can meet up with, like, other parents would be there that I could visit with. And so I accidentally had a 1,000 hours outside childhood for my kids. And I'm super grateful for that, especially as I was reading your book and hearing about all of the benefits. And for people who are listening, one of my later questions for Ginny is going to be how can we introduce some of this with your lifestyle might not be what mine was or what yours was. So hang in there if this is feeling like I want to get there, but I don't want to get there quite yet.
Right.
Um, so I want to talk a little bit about what I loved about your book. Was I was not expecting was it was going to be about a lot more than being outside, 1,000 hours outside. And what
Mhm.
it struck me about your book was that the the 1,000 hours outside idea is a shortcut to something else, right? It's a shortcut to a slow childhood. And it's a way of, I have a quote from you that I love so much where you talk about the combination of screens, homework, schoolwork, and enrollment in adult directed activities is gobbling up our children's time, right? And so, can you talk a little bit about, in your research and in your experience, what you've seen as, I guess, sort of the generational change in terms of what the childhood of the, I think you're a child of the 80s, I'm a child of the 70s,
Mhm.
might look like compared to today, and just I lay it out for us, because I want to talk
Mhm.
about the going back to that slow childhood that we might have had.
Well, I think
Did
it's
you
a
get my question in
well-intentioned
there?
change. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a
Okay.
well-intentioned change. I don't think anyone is purposefully trying to harm their kids.
Of
I
course
think
not. Yeah.
actually every parent is trying to do the best they can, and they look around like how I did. You look around and you see what everyone else is doing, and what is everyone else doing? Mainly, they're enrolling in programs that are directed by adults. And I love that you use the phrase, you said we accidentally had this childhood that it had a lot of outdoor components, a lot of hands-on real life components. And I think that pre-screens and pre like this No Child Left Behind, the really big increase in standardized testing, I think that kids also had an accidental outdoor childhood. It just was sort of how society was structured. So as a kid, there were limits on television that my parents didn't have to impose. They didn't
Yeah,
have to
because who
say,
wants to watch The Price is Right?
right. I kind of like the Price is Right.
No, you know what I
Well,
mean, though. It
come on
wasn't like
out.
if you wanted
Yeah,
to watch
yes,
TV, there were very limited things that you could watch. So it was like,
yes.
do I want to watch this, or do I want to turn it off and do something else?
Right. And I had read that even there's statistics about it. Like, in the 60s, there was 27 hours a week of children's programming, and that didn't even go year round. I mean, there weren't new shows in the summer. It was all reruns. And so by the by the very fact that society had those limits, kids played more. And because the limits were there for everyone and at the same time, which I think is a crucial part too, it's like everyone's cartoons turned off at noon on Saturday. And on Sunday, there was nothing to watch. I mean, there was not one option at all. And so then all the kids are out in the neighborhood at the same time too. And so things have really changed, right? We have screens that are available 24/7 with an unlimited amount of content. When you're talking about video games, social media, YouTube, streaming content, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, Paramount Plus. I mean, there is an endless amount of content that kids could watch. So you take that and then you combine it with this push for academics, which I think started, I mean, it may have started back with the race to the moon, but it's really seeped in through this No Child Left Behind, Head Start, all of these words that insinuate that your kid could fall behind the other ones. And there's a little bit of fear there. We don't want that. We want our kids at least to be maybe up with the pack, hopefully. And then there's all of these options for life enhancement that are good and beautiful. But if you do them all, then your kid is left with no time of their own.
Mhm.
And so I think it's really easy for that to happen. If you have a 7 or 8 hour school day, where we live, the bus for the littler ones, elementary school, it comes at 8 a.m. and it doesn't come back till 4:45 for a 5-year-old. And that's a long day. And then if you have, let's say, gymnastics and then piano, or that's sometimes how it goes, you've got a 12-hour day for a kid. And I think this is somewhat common and they're good things, but I think we've lost the importance of our own time. And
Mhm.
kids need that. What happens when they have their own time is they learn to self structure. So they're working through their imagination, they're learning what lights them up, they're learning how to be with themselves, they're learning how to thrive when they're not constantly entertained. There's so much going on there with their executive function and being able to carry out an idea from beginning to end, all of those things. And so when you don't have it, so I guess it's one of the things you could talk about is what happens if you don't have that? Because I think as a parent, I was like, okay, what if? What if we don't have that? What if we don't have ample downtime for our kids? Well, what happens is they struggle with making decisions because they haven't had any practice doing so. They've always been told what to do and how to do it and when to do it. So, someone who talks about that is a woman named Dr. Jean Twenge, who wrote these really cool books. She's the leading expert on generational change. So she's written some fantastic books, and she's also a college professor in California. So she says what she's noticed in the past several years is that her students are now coming to college, and she says they can't even make simple decisions without texting their parents because they've not been in the driver's seat ever.
Mhm.
They've always been in the passenger seat where someone else is directing everything that they do. And so I love this book by Luis Fernando Llosa with Kim John Payne. It's called Beyond Winning. It's a book I may not have picked up, except that I love those authors, and it's about youth sports culture, but so much more. It's one of those books that there's so much more in it than just the sports culture. But one of the sentences says, and I feel like every parent should have this like up on their fridge. It says, "When your kids are bored, you have not failed."
Mhm.
And I think that might be the crux of it, that we look around at the busyness and we do think that sometimes that these kids are bored and we failed them. So there's a lot to be said about those spaces of nothing on your calendar. I think you should give yourself a pat on the back if you can keep a few of them open because it's hard. There's a
Yeah.
lot of pressure to fill. But it's important to know that kids need that downtime for a lot of reasons. And if you can save some of it for them, it's really a gift.
I love that. And just to go back to what you were talking about, the changes that happened, I think maybe my parents, or maybe I can't remember which generation it is, but at a certain point, there was no longer this guarantee that you were going to do better than your parents, right? In terms of like your, education level and income and, all of that. And I think that's probably really filtered in to a lot of these decisions that parents are making in terms of wanting their kids to be situated to be successful. And
Hmm.
I think I want to come back to that in a second, but I also, shoot, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, I
We'll go
think, can
with
we
that
stick
then.
there? Can we stick
Yeah.
there? I mean, because I think this is actually a really important part. And this is partly what the book is about. When we're looking at the future for our kids, we're not looking at a future that is similar to ours. Although I would say that, I mean, here we are doing a podcast. So you and I have both had some sort of a pivot in our life because podcasts did not exist when I was a young adult. certainly not when I was a child, right? So we both have pivoted and gone with the flow of society and picked up some side things. But our kids, they're not going to have these 30-year jobs waiting for them, like how people did in generations past, where you had a full 30-year time span where you worked at the same company and you had mostly the same coworkers. And there was one set of skills that you maybe tweaked along the way. But what's happening today is that the skills are advancing more rapidly. So a skill set may not last a whole generation. It might only last 6 years. Certain careers are becoming more obsolete. They're becoming obsolete quicker than they used to. And so this could throw a parent for a loop. I mean, this is kind of freaky, right? We are preparing our kids for a world that we don't yet really know. And I think when you look at something like a chat GPT, that all of a sudden, to me, seemed like it came out of nowhere and it can write your papers for you and no one would even know. I mean, this changes a lot of things. It takes a lot of jobs, copywriting jobs, things like that, and it starts to push them out a little bit. And so in some ways this is kind of exciting. We're raising our kids to be on their toes a little bit. We're raising them to be adaptable. We're not raising them for probably a lifelong career. And so that means that the skills that they're going to need for an unknown future include things like grit, resilience, this noticing the changes, what's going on around them, this resiliency, innovation, creativity, a sense of confidence like I can do this, I can deal with this change, this problem, and also some pretty good social skills because kids today they say will have four on average jobs entering into adulthood, four jobs in their first decade of adulthood. That's the average. So that's a lot of coworkers, that's a lot of people, that's a lot of bosses that you're going to have to navigate through. And so this is a change, and the way that we set our kids up to be successful in a world that's rapidly changing is simply to give them downtime so that they
Right.
can learn how to do it, so that they can learn how to manage themselves, so that they can try things and see what that feels like, so they can really learn what lights them up. And so this is actually really a message of hope, right? That you can do less and gain more. And I think, I know you talk a lot about the power struggles and the yelling and like that sort of that's what's happening in our homes, and it's like when you let off the reins a little bit, I mean, talk about letting go of power struggles, right? It gives your home a little bit more peace and a
Totally.
little bit more breathing room. And all the while, that is truly preparing your kids for a future that's changing quick.
Yes, and that's where I wanted to go with that, which is what you say in your book about a slow childhood, which is again that you're not gobbling up all the time with screens and adult centered or adult directed activities is actually going to lead to that adaptability that you said that that woman, Jean something. And by the way,
Hmm.
I came away from your book with a whole reading list of books that I need to get. I loved. I was like, oh, I've never heard of that. I've never heard of that, and I kept a little list going while I was reading your book of things I need to look up. But that adaptability piece is actually what's going to set them up to be successful, to be able to make decisions and have that grit and the self drive. And yeah, and it does. There is a link there to our peaceful parenting big ideas, which is in terms of limit setting. Is this really a limit that I need to set? Can I let go? Can I let my child make the decision about this? So I love how you tied that in, and thank you. And the other thing I was going to say was I was just talking to a client yesterday about she has a 5-year-old in kindergarten, and she was feeling really worried because he wasn't in any extracurricular activities, and everyone
Mm-hmm.
around her had their kids in this and had their kids in that. And I just love that your book, and I recommended your book to her, and I said you're going to have this book and you're going to wave it in other people's faces. I was just joking, but you're going to say like, this person says that it's actually better for my kid to not be in all of these extracurriculars, unless of course they're desperately wanting to do it. And I think that's the
Yes.
key that you talk about too, is like, if you have a kid that like lives for hockey, of course they're going to be in hockey, right? But the point is
Hmm.
that it's not adult directed, it's child directed.
Right. Right. Oh, I feel for that mom. to have a 5-year-old. But even in that book, I mean, I'll go back to it, that Beyond Winning, where they say, when your kids are bored, you have not failed. They tell stories about parents of, 2, 3-year-olds who, like, am I already behind? Am I already behind on skill development? And it's a hard time to be a parent. There is a
Yeah.
lot of pressure, a lot of unknowns, and I feel for that mom. What's interesting is that one of the things I think that changed my perspective on parenting was that I had read this questionnaire for parents. It's called the Rich Habits Test for Parents. And it's this 40 question test. It's like my midwife sent it to me. It's on Google by Tom Corley. And it goes along with this book about your habits. It's like the habits of wealthy people, which that's not what I'm concerned about. I don't care if our kids are wealthy, but you want them to be sort of successful and fulfilled in their life. In this list of habits included reading biographies. So there's 40 habits, and they're pretty simple. It's like wishing the people that are important in my life a happy birthday. I mean, that's one of the 40. So it's kind of like the social skills, and none of it has to do with grade point averages, none of it has to do with extracurricular activities. But one of the things is that you read biographies. And when you read biographies of successful people, what you get from them is that they've had a lot of ups and downs. Every single person who's successful, who has a biography written about them, has a lot of ups and downs, and they all have a lot of curves in their path, a lot of things that are happenstance. And I was talking to this man recently named Ken Coleman, who works for Dave Ramsey. He's a big money guy, and he was telling his story that when he was 29, so we're talking about a decade into adulthood, 29, he had some situation where someone else canceled something at the last minute and he had to fill in. And that's what jump started his career as a broadcaster, because someone else, it was happenstance. And so I think as parents, we have to realize that once our kids become adults, we really don't have any control. And I really think part of the purpose of childhood is this passing of the baton, that we practice little by little relinquishing, and they practice little by little taking it, so that adulthood is not this stark contrast for either one of us. Because it's hard to give up control with little kids. But all along, I think the less control that we have as it goes along in age appropriate ways, right? Definitely in age appropriate ways. We're not going to let our little ones play by the road with a ball, that, no, we're not. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about, letting them make some of their own decisions, or letting them climb up onto the fallen log. I mean, they might slip off, but their bodies are driving them onto these decisions. So we're slowly learning to trust them. Well, they're slowly learning to trust themselves. And I do think that that alleviates so much of the power struggles of parenting. I think a lot of those power struggles come back to control. And we don't. You do for a little period of time, and then you're letting go, letting go, letting go. And then they have their own path that they follow.
Yeah, I think if you did a like a revised edition of your book, you might want to include a chapter on managing your own parental anxiety, because I think that's what drives a lot of, not that your book isn't complete. Sorry, I didn't mean to like insult you in my idea there, but it's that fear, right? That's the fear driven
Yeah.
mistakes, that the fear that they're not going to be successful, so they have to have all these extracurriculars and math
Hmm.
outside of school, and also the fear in those little ways of my somebody told me the other day that a preschool teacher had told them that the kids in her classes can't walk on bumpy surfaces anymore, because the parents like pick them up and carry them over bumpy surfaces because they are afraid they're going to fall, right? So it's like those
Right.
little fears of, I don't want you to get hurt and bump your knee, and to the bigger fears of, we've got to load your schedule so that you have all of these things to, get into the best college or whatever it is. So I think a big part of this, letting your child have a slow childhood, is, or even not even letting, creating the right circumstances so that they can have a slow childhood, is managing your own fear.
I mean, I think you hit that right on the head. I think it's the biggest. People ask, why do you think kids don't play anymore? And obviously, there's all these reasons of increased technology and a different way that society is set up. But I think that's the reason. I think there's a fear component, and we're just nervous about the future. So I think it's well intentioned, but we're paddling in the wrong direction. And what's interesting, and one of the things I talk about in the book, is risk assessment. So there's actually a formula for risk assessment. The formula for risk assessment is how dangerous is it in combination with how likely is it to happen. So an example would be letting a small child play near a body of water. How dangerous is that? Extremely. And how likely is something to happen? Extremely. So that's a very risky situation. But if you have a child that walks on a bumpy surface, to take your example, which I think is a really good one, it's like, how dangerous is it? It's not. They might get a scrape, they might break a bone, and that happens sometimes in childhood, but it's not very dangerous. How likely is it that something will happen? Probably high. If you have your kid that's balancing across a fallen tree log, how dangerous is it? It's not very dangerous. But how likely is it that they're going to slip off and scrape their leg? It's kind of high. But what happens is kids have to learn how to assess those risks because it's their body. They have to learn what their body can and can't do. Otherwise, as they get taller and further from the ground, then they're in a more risky position because they haven't learned themselves. They haven't learned what they're capable of. And so, once again, I think it's a well intentioned pursuit in the wrong direction. We have to pass off risk management as our kids grow from us to them. So, the way that you might do that is if you take a hike with a toddler and you're not in your cars, you're back in a path, and they want to climb up on the slanted side and they might slip down. Those are the types of things where you learn to trust them as they're learning to trust their own bodies. And it becomes this natural handing off of the risk management, of the control of their own lives, very small steps throughout the entirety of childhood.
Yeah,
And then you
totally.
learn. You learn how to manage your anxiety. I mean, I think that's how it's meant to work. You learn how to manage your anxiety in small little pieces because you learn, okay, they were okay there. It was 3 minutes of crying because they did fall and scrape their knee and we made it through. And then we can make it through the things that are a little harder.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you do address that in your book. I forgot about your chapter on the risk management. There are a couple other things I was just thinking about with that. One, I've read research that, well, not I've read about the research. I haven't actually read the research. That if you don't let kids experience risk when they're little, it pushes it off to the later years when you can't control them anymore, and you really don't want your teenagers experimenting with risk, right? Like you want
Hmm.
them to do that when they're little, and learn about it when they're little. And the other thing, I just saw this reel the other day that was like from an occupational therapist who talked about balance as having to figure out your balance as super regulating, and the
Hmm.
images that went along with the reel where she was talking were like kids walking on a log or walking just different things out in nature and having to find their balance. And I just was thinking as you were talking, it's so like everything is so interconnected, because when you don't have those physical regulating activities, you've got a kid who gets dysregulated more easily also, right? So
Hmm.
and also you think about the rise in sensory challenges that kids are having, and how much of that is because they're not getting that
Hmm.
time outdoors and time to be able to use their own bodies and figure out how their bodies work. So I think, just to harken back to my comment about your all the ideas in your book as being like this shortcut, that a thousand hours outside being a shortcut to so many other things. I just love it. Let's talk before we move into the how people can do this if their lifestyle might not be totally accommodating.
Hmm.
Can we just talk about light for a minute? Because I really love that you brought in the idea of light, and your story of your light meter and looking at the different light inside and outside. I've told like three people about that since I read it in your book. But can you just talk about that? That's another side benefit that I hadn't really thought about.
Hmm. I had never thought about it either until I talked to this man named Dr. Chris Winter, who wrote a book about sleep for kids. And there was a little bit of undercurrents because my midwife had always said, if you want your child to sleep better, get them outside in the morning. And I just remember thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. So I didn't really pay any attention. And turns out that she was right. She was always right. But what happens when you go outside in the morning? And light is just an interesting thing. It's something I had never thought about. I use light for my vision. You flip the switch, you've got the light, but all light is not created equal, I guess is the point. And And the sunlight is a wave. It is a spectrum of colors. And when you go outside at different points of the day, the spectrum changes. So basically, sunlight is a guide for your physiology. It's not just for vision. That's what I learned in the past several years is that light is not only for vision, it's also for guiding your body. So if you go outside in the morning in the way that the light waves are and you expose your eyes and your skin, your face to, and this works for people that are blind as well. It helps. So it also permeates your skin, that the light waves permeate and it helps your body to release serotonin. And that makes you feel good. This happens in the morning. And you start off the day feeling good and light and lively and bright. And then as the day progresses, the serotonin turns into melatonin. So, everyone I think has those experiences where they were camping or they were outside for a whole day, maybe at a family picnic or something. And you come home and you hit the pillow like a kid. I mean, you fall asleep immediately because you're so tired. It's that good kind of tired. And that's what it's coming from. And that's just one piece of it. The sunlight also, it helps to reset. I think there are over 100 body processes that are dependent on the day and night cycle. So, what I learned specifically from Dr. Chris Winter is that light is measured in lux. So, lux is a candle light's worth of light. One lux is one candle. And you have to be exposed to a certain amount of light, several thousand lux, in order for that reset to happen. In order for your melatonin to shut off and your serotonin to start for the next day to renew here's the new day, it's got to be in the several thousands. Well, you can buy there are probably even apps on your phone where you can measure the lux. It's and it's kind of nerdily fascinating because partially because it's something I'd never thought of in my life. So you can go around your home and you can measure how bright it is. Well, indoors, it's never brighter than in the hundreds, 800. And you quickly realize, oh, this isn't enough light to reset these systems in my body. But if I step outside, even on a cloudy day, and you guys probably get this in Toronto, just like how we do in Michigan, the winter is fairly cloudy and gloomy the whole time. It's gray. But even on those gray, gloomy days, that light meter shoots up into the thousands. And so that is actually doing something for your body quite significantly just by getting out in the morning for 10, 15, 20 minutes and exposing yourself to the light. And it's really neat. The colors are meant to really guide our bodies. The end of the day, the blues and the purples are meant to help wind us down. So it's kind of I just one of those extra exciting things. So a little extra push to get out, a push to start your day if you at all can with a little bit of full spectrum sunlight, and it makes a lot of difference for your health and for your mood.
Yeah, that was the thing that I thought was really interesting that shocked me when you compared the lux inside on even on a sunny, bright sunny day compared with outdoors on a, gloomy, cloudy day, and it was like shockingly higher outside on a gloomy, cloudy day than inside on a bright sunny day. And again, it's just like the 1,000 hours outside is another shortcut to trying to get our physical self with the light, right? Getting that light. And
Hmm.
somebody could even, maybe this is a good segue to going into how we can bring some of these ideas to a family with two working parents and those kids who, go get on the bus at 8 and don't get home till 5 kind of thing. But even going outside for 15 minutes and running around your backyard in the morning instead of having indoor playtime, that would be, I think, something that parents could easily work into their, with a little effort, work into their schedule. But I'm sure in your speaking, I was picturing you on speaking tours with people raising their hands and saying, "Yeah, but Ginny, I don't." I'm not a stay-at-home mom, or I don't homeschool. Like, how am I supposed to do these things? So, what do you tell those parents?
It's a good question, the yeah buts. And I think that goes with anything anyone ever talks about. You're trying to eat better, you're trying to eat, maybe more organic. Yeah, but, right? There's always those situations. I start by saying that 1,000 Hours Outside is a global movement, and there have been tens of thousands of families that have participated, millions of children, and maybe not millions, but in the million of children. I don't even know how you would say that. But and they're from all different walks of life. So there's homeschool families, there's public school families, there's single moms, there's dual working parents. There's kids that are with grandparents. There's all these different situations. Kids that are in wheelchairs, all these different situations. And I always say that no matter how much time you get outside, you win. So if you get outside for 422 hours in a year, you win. I mean, that is a substantial amount that is really affecting the quality of your life. And good for you. Good for you. The average child today is outside for 4 to 7 minutes a day playing freely, 4 to 7 minutes, but on screens for 4 to 7 hours. So if you were able to tip that back, even just a little bit, good on you. It is a lot of work. This is what the society used to do for kids. It wasn't on the parents' shoulders. And now it's all on your shoulders. You're the one that has to put up the boundaries for the screens. You're the one that has to usually make plans with someone else to meet up to go outside because there aren't kids out in the neighborhood naturally anymore. It is a lot of work for the parents. I will say it is also very rewarding because it's definitely enhancing your life some along the way. Whereas in generations past, the moms, whoever was the primary caregiver, often stayed inside and the kids would go play by themselves. So there were some benefits to that, but there's also benefits of being around. I'm also getting all the benefits that nature has to offer. So I'll start there. Be proud of however much time you get that's hands on in real life, whether it's inside or outside. You're playing board games, you're going to the indoor pool, whatever it is, you should be really proud of that and know that it really matters and makes a difference. Um, for parents who both work, or a single parent, your idea of movement before school is really a good one. And a lot of people echo that. So if you could walk to school, or if you could even walk part of the way to school. So this is an idea from Katie Bowman, who has Nutritious Movement. She talks about just don't drive the whole way. Drive most of the way, but walk the rest. Maybe you park a couple blocks away instead of getting in that long line. Park a couple blocks away and walk the rest. You can even do that with other things in your life. You're going to the library, you're going to the grocery store. Don't drive the whole way, drive most of the way and walk the rest. So, little ideas. I actually was just talking to a mom yesterday who has kids in the public school system. And she said when school is out, there's a small group of families that stay and play. Now, their school had a creek bed that ran, maybe across the street, she said. But you could stay and play at the playground because the playground is open once the school day is over to the public. So you could bring a snack. And are there 3 or 4 families that would be willing to stick around for 30 minutes or 45 minutes once that school day is over? What a thing for kids to look forward to. At the end of the day, they get to go run around on the playground. There's no one blowing a whistle. There's no playground monitor. They get to play maybe in a multi age setting with some other families. And if you had dinner in a crock pot, or we like this book, it's got 30-minute meals in it by Robin Miller. If you've got a quick dinner you can prepare, then maybe you could do that for 30 or 45 minutes before you head home. You could take a small chunk of time on the weekend and say, we're going to give this to being outside. And I liked what you said at the very beginning. When you go outside, you do get to leave behind the to do list for a bit. And as a parent who is under a lot of pressure, you get a little bit of time to just be and to not be thinking, oh, I should be folding that. I should be cleaning that. I should be working because work has followed us everywhere now. And you have maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, or maybe you go and you've got enough food that you can stay a little bit longer if your kids are engaged. And if you're married, you can maybe have a conversation with your spouse. I mean, it actually helps because the kids are very engaged. And so there's a lot of connection happening. So that's what people are doing that are in situations where they don't have as much expendable time. Maybe the vacation that you take, if you take a vacation a year, maybe that centers a little bit more around outdoor activities. And those hours really rack up, a long weekend of camping, that type of thing. So I think that's what people around the globe are doing in those different situations. And, I've had parents that say, look, I can only get outside for 250 hours because we have split custody. But that time being intentional and celebrating and knowing how valuable it is, it still really matters and is a huge win.
I love that. And you close out your book by saying it's never too late. And I think that's the key, a key takeaway is never too late. And that some is better than, don't give up just because you can't do 1,000 hours. Go for whatever you can, because it is going to be, I found that, I don't know if that statistic was in your book, the 4 to 7 minutes outside, playing unstructured play and 4 to 7 hours of screen. Wow. That's really quite, quite wild.
Yeah.
So
It's a big
yeah.
imbalance. It's on the back for sure. I'm not sure if it's on the inside. It's on the back cover, but um it's it's one of those things that's just fairly out of whack. And I think the point is not necessarily that, we have to do some major life overhaul, but we do have to do at least something because kids are struggling. And I think everybody knows that kids are struggling to a degree with their mental health. And a lot of that, not all, but a lot of people point back to a lack of autonomy, um, and just this drive to do all these things and to never have a chance to sort of let it all go. And it really, it really does a lot for your quality of life. I like that you use the word shortcut. I always say it's the answer to a lot of modern parenting problems because it's a little bit of an answer to the screen battle. If you're not home, you can't, if you're outside, if you're playing a board game, if you're whatever, you can't be on the screen. So our best days are the ones where we simply just run out of time for screens. But it's an answer to, the fears that we have. And, every time that we are out with our kids and they're doing these different things and they're driven internally to do them, it's a reminder that we can let it go a little bit, that we don't have to be quite so involved. And we learn that we can trust them. And that's a beautiful thing that happens when we're out. So it is, I like the word shortcut that you use, though. It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
shortcut to a lot of things.
really inspiring. I'm going to be definitely sharing this with a lot of the family. I mean, obviously, you're going to be on the podcast, but yeah, I've already been talking to lots of people about your book and about your work, and I just want to thank you for putting it out there. And it's fun talking to you because I think both of us came from very similar places, and both of us have found this. I think I thought I would be a teacher. I know you did teach for a little while, and we both still are teaching, but I think we both
Yes.
came to this through our children and kind of like that what's next? What can I do when my kids are at home? And I don't want to be unavailable. And we both came to this place where we're helping people. I love it. So, last question that I'm going to leave you with is a question that I ask all my podcast guests, which is, if you could go back in time to your younger parent self, what advice would you give yourself?
So I say this often. I have no regrets. I wouldn't do one thing differently, um, because we have had this beautiful, and I'll still answer the question, but we have had this beautiful 12 years of fullness. I mean, we have had a really full life together through simple outdoor experiences. And I think a lot of people live with regrets, and you can't know what you don't know. I had no idea that this lifestyle would work as well for teenagers as it does for toddlers. And I do love that. I love that I love that you can find something that works for parenting of different stages because so many things you learn about parenting they only last for a short period of time and then the kid changes, but nature works all the way through. But what I would tell myself as a young mom, one of the things I did struggle with is that sometimes you see other moms doing more than you and you're in a stage where you can't, like you have got babies, and I'm talking about maybe a side hustle or something that you're passionate about. And I read this book when I was a young mom called On Being There. It was about motherhood in the early years. And it said something like, as a young mom, as a mom, I guess, you can do everything. You can do anything, just not all at the same time. And that really helped me, but I didn't know if it was true or not. I'm like, "Well, is that really true?" And I think I would reassure myself that in time, your passions and the things that light you up, those do weave back into your life. And so you can truly trust the timeline of your journey, the timeline of your mothering, and know that seasons pass and you take all of those things that you've learned and all of those things that you've done, and they build you into the person you are today. And then the timeline unfolds naturally. So it was okay. Like, it was okay that for a decade plus, that all I did was be a mom. And in time, things sorted themselves out. So I think I would tell myself that that actually is true. It just takes some time to get there.
I love that. Where's the best place to go for people to find out more about you and what you do?
I'm not very creative, Sarah. So everything is just 1,000 hours outside.
Well,
That's what we are on
that's
social media.
simple. It's perfect.
1000hoursoutside.com. We have some free tracker sheets that people blow up and put on their walls, or they keep it the same size and put on their fridge, and they're actually keeping track of their time outside and they are celebrating. I saw this dad recently. He gave his kids these necklaces that had like 100 Cheerios on them, and they'd been outside for 100 hours, and he did a big announcement. I mean, this is good. We need to celebrate, I think, the effort that we put in toward these hands on experiences. So that's there, and a kickoff pack with different ideas for each month. So there's a lot of things there on the website. And we have an app also called the 1000 Hours Outside app. Some people like to keep track of their time outside on the app, and then there's little badges that they get. It's pretty fun. So, and the book is called Until the Streetlights Come On. It comes out November 14th. So, like you said, it will already be out once this goes live. It would make a great, I think, baby shower gift or a holiday gift for someone that you love in your life. And it's just a message of hope that we can live a full life today that still prepares our kids for tomorrow.
Love it. Thanks, Ginny.
Thanks, Sarah.